My earliest memory is in my parents' bedroom and my mother holding my hand. I still have a very image. I think I was probably 3 or 4 or something like that. It's the earliest memory I have. That kind of stuff. Real memories didn't start until I guess I was in the first grade, when I was about 7 years old. When I was 7 years old, the war started, the Second World War started, so I have lots of memories of that war. And fortunately, there was only one relative, one of my father's brothers, who was young enough to be in the war, but I didn't really know him. I had never met him. So as a young kid, the war was really exciting time, following the news. And I particularly remember the newspaper after the invasion, after the D-Day invasion. The newspaper would, on the front page, would have a map of Europe, and they would outline the success of the invasion. It would be like a back thing. So whenever I came home from school, the first thing I would do to make sure I find a newspaper to follow the success of the invasion. And I remember particularly Pearl Harbor Day. It was a Sunday, and we had relatives over for dinner on Sunday when newspaper boys started running up and down the street selling extra newspapers and things of that sort. So that was how it started off very clearly. I still have that in my memory. I have one brother. He was older, 4 years older than me, and he passed. He lived here briefly for a while. In fact, that was one of the reasons we showed up here, because we got to know the place from visiting my brother Melvin. My father had a pretty serious drinking problem when I was growing up. So although I felt secure and loved by them, it was not the most happy, pleasant family to grow up in. So I often would spend more time at my friends' homes than I'd spend at home, kind of thing. So it was kind of difficult during those days.
Did you have a decent relationship with your dad?
Yeah. I had he was not abusive in any way. He just, every night he'd come home with too much drink on him, and often then he and my mother would have these verbal arguments, kind of thing. But then on the weekends, so my mother worked. She was a waitress and things of that kind of thing. And so on a weekend, my father would feel guilty, and we'd have to clean the house. He'd get my brother and I up, and we dreaded it because we had to clean the whole house and do the wash and all that kind of stuff. So, so he had those kinds of feelings, sort of thing. And then occasionally, my mother was from Virginia, and she'd get fed up with the situation, and she would pack up my brother and I, and we'd take a train back to Staunton, Virginia, where she would,
I know Stan.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Shenandoah Valley.
So we'd be down there, and then after a couple of days, my dad would show up, feeling really bad, and all that sort of stuff. And then for the next 6 months, he'd behave himself pretty well, but gradually things would go back. But as a kid, it was really a nice experience to take the train down. There's a picture in here of the old Camden station hanging on a wall, and I've actually taken trains from there, from that picture. I haven't Did I ever tell you that, Pat? That picture down there on the first floor as you come in. Anyway,
I saw it.
yeah. And then it was interesting on those trips to Staunton. I particularly remember, and I'm not sure what relative it was, but we were staying in somebody's house, and it was a kind of had not a large farm, but they had a garden thing, and they raised chickens and stuff like that. And in the kitchen, they had the old stove that you heated up with wood and, wherever you did kind of thing. Big old iron stove. So it was Sunday. It was going to have a Sunday dinner. So I said, well, we'll have chicken. And he went out in the yard and he grabbed the chicken. I had never seen it before, and cut his head off. And of course the chicken ran all around, all that kind of stuff. I remember that pretty clearly as a youngster. But I didn't eat any of the chicken for dinner. I kind of lost my appetite for the chicken.
What did your dad do for a living?
He was a roofer. He worked on the roofs for all his years. Yeah. He always worked. He'd come home not in pretty good shape, but he always got up the next morning and went to work. He always worked. Yeah.
Was he a religious man?
No, particularly. No, neither of my parents were church people, and they never went to church. I was raised Catholic, and they made sure that I went to church and that kind of stuff. Actually, my mother converted and became a Catholic, and she was baptized in a church and that kind of thing. I guess I was around a young teenager when she did that kind of thing.
And then let's talk about your mother. Your relationship.
Yeah. Because my mother was one of 4 sisters. They were very poor people. They lived in Staunton, Virginia. My grandfather never had any kind of trade or anything. I'm not exactly sure what he did for a living. I think often I understand my grandmother worked for more wealthy people and kind of lived in a house with them and things of that sort. So, excuse me, the oldest sister moved to Richmond and got work, and gradually the other sisters moved to Richmond, and then one of them moved to Baltimore and found employment, and then so everybody moved to Baltimore. That's how come we got to Baltimore, because that was the way they could get employment. One of the stories I was very proud of as a youngster was on one of my visits to Staunton. My grandmother took me up to Woodrow Wilson's home. He was a native of that city. And she wanted to show me this picture in there. So when Wilson won the inauguration, they had a big parade in town for him. And so this was in the teens, I can't remember exactly when. And he was to ride this coach with 4 horses, pulled by 4 horses. And apparently my grandfather must have worked in that area or something or other. So the story was they offered him a quart of whiskey if he would drive the horses. And so my grandmother took me up to the house, and we went in and showed me on the wall where it was. So I was quite proud of that. I remember going home after that, telling all my friends about my grandfather, having that occasion. So many years later, I guess we had been married a good 25, 30 years, so I decided we should take Pat down to down to Staunton to show what it was. And I, of course, told her the story about my grandfather, and I said, we got to go up and show you that picture. So we went in, and we went into the room, and to where I remember seeing it, it wasn't there. Looked all around, it wasn't there. So I talked to one of the doses there and told her about it, and she said that she wasn't aware of it. We never could find it anyway. I'm not sure whether Pat thought I made this story up, but it was a really true story. It was one of the highlights of my young year. And then also we went to visit a relative who lived in an actual farm, working kind of farm. And I was really impressed with that because they didn't have electricity there. And when the sun went down, they just brought these lamps out and lit the lamps up. It was quite an explosion. They had a telephone hanging on the wall that rang all the time. Nobody paid attention until finally somebody would jump up and answer the phone, because you were on I think they called it a party line, and each person had a certain kind of ring, and the thing would ring, nobody paying attention, and then all of a sudden somebody would jump up. I thought that was really nice. So they had a big barn. We could go in the barn and jump in the hay and that kind of stuff. So that was kind of fun. One of the highlights of my young childhood.
What was your mom like?
She was a quiet person. She didn't have a whole lot of friends. Because of my father's drinking, we never had very many people over the house. She usually, whenever she had a job, she would usually get close friends with a particular person, that kind of thing.
But you had a good relationship with her.
Oh, yeah. As I said, always felt loved and secure, even though we had this contention in the house because of my father's drinking. We lived in a neighborhood where there was lots of kids and friends, and back in those days, my father was one of 7 children, and most of his brothers and sisters lived within walking distance of us. You know, all my good friends lived across the street or down the block and that kind of thing. So it was a relatively happy childhood, except for this contention with my father drinking, sort of thing.
The streets of Baltimore.
The streets of Baltimore.
You just alluded to it.
Oh, yes.
Paint that picture. Being 10, 11, 12. Buddies all over the place.
I guess it was like a little village within the city. You know, say within a mile or so of where I lived, I was very familiar with all the areas around us. We were maybe 5 or 6 blocks from kind of the edge of town, where there was undeveloped part of town. And as kids, we would go out there and we would have all kinds of games we would play and things of that sort. They started to clear the area, and then the war came, and so this ground lay fallow the whole time. And so for 4 or 5 years, there was this big plot of ground that was just there. Lnobody paid any attention to it. So it was a great place for us kids to go up, and we would find old housing materials that we would try to put together and make little huts and things out of that, and play games and that kind of stuff. So it was that kind of a neighborhood. You know, a block away was the movie theater where you could see a movie for 12 cents. You know, if you had $1, you were in pretty good shape back in those days. I actually have since gone back to the old neighborhood and taken pictures of where I lived and the school I went to, the church I went to, various kinds of things like that. So I have those. In fact, my oldest friend was, he's 93 now, and we still keep in touch. He doesn't live very far from here. And we get together 4 or 5 times a year for lunch, that kind of thing. So I had taken a lot of pictures of the old neighborhood, the old movie theater that we would go to, which of course is not operational now. So I remember to take him over. His name was Howard. And I went over and showed him. So we had a great time looking at those pictures and bringing back all the old memories of our youth and childhood growing up there. And then I was in the Boy Scouts, joined the Boy Scouts at 12, and sort of developed my love for nature and camping and hiking, these kind of things, which turned out to be very, very helpful, because after we were first married and had our children, all our vacations were camping vacations. And so we were able to, because of that, we were able to see a good deal of the country that I wouldn't ordinarily have been able to see. One of the, I guess the most significant adventure of theirs was when Chris, our oldest son, was 3 years old. I came home. I was working for what's called Big Brothers, and they didn't pay a lot. They had a month's vacation, so that was nice. So I came home and I told Pat, I said, hey, we're going to California. I had an aunt and uncle that lived in California. I said, we're going to California. And so she was really happy, and really she said, oh, it's great. She's going to fly out there and show her new son off to the relatives. And I said, well, we're going to actually go camping out there. So we had a Volkswagen Beetle. So I rented a pop-up trailer, and we loaded everything up and took across country in this trailer with my 3-year-old son. And we had a great adventure. I tell people now that I took this month's vacation across the country, and it cost us $500. I remember coming home, I had $5 left from the trip. We had some great adventures on that kind of trip. So many of our vacations were all across the West, in Canada and Key West and all those kind of places, sort of thing. So finally, when the kids left the house and we had a little more money, then we started doing actual real vacations, going across. And we had a lot of wonderful vacations and opportunity to explore the world, that kind of thing.
But what kind of kid were you? 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Are you rambunctious? Are you mischievous? Are you loud? Are you obnoxious? Are you popular? What do you remember about you?
I was none of those things that you just described. I was pretty quiet and shy kind of a kid. And we had a lot of friends in the neighborhood. And when I went to high school, I met new people and had friends of that sort. But I was, I guess, somewhat shy kind of a kid. It was just my brother and I, so, girls were a mystery to me. I was anxious about that kind of thing. Although, because I guess when I went to high school, things began to change a little bit. A good friend of mine, because I tell this story, a good friend of mine who was quite a outgoing kind of a kid, very, very intelligent, very articulate kid. We became friends. So he said, and there was another young kid named Frank who lived across the street. He was my best friend, and we went to school together. So this guy, Jerry, said, why don't you guys join the dramatic club? I said, we're not doing a dramatic club. We don't do that kind of stuff. He said, no, join the dramatic club because there's great parties, and you get a chance to meet all these girls, because as with all boys school, whenever we put a show on, the show would be in conjunction with one of the girls' schools. So you got a chance to meet lots of new girls, and there'd be parties after the show and that kind of stuff. So I guess, I got less shy after those experiences. High school was a great time, really enjoyed it. One of my one of my first jobs was working for a photographer, and I worked in his darkroom doing photographic and enlargement equipment. He took mostly weddings kind of thing, portraits and things of that sort. And so he sold me a camera, which is called a 4x5 speed graphic camera, which is kind of the camera you would see in old movies when you'd see newspaper guys. They have these big cameras. And so I had that camera. So in high school, I got the chance to take pictures for the sports and the team, the basketball team and that kind of thing. We started, and then we decided to start our own camera club. We found this extra room that nobody was using, and we got the principal to give us some money, and we bought some equipment. But we didn't want to have a brother moderator. We wanted to be on our own, so we could put a lock on the door. One of the brothers found out about it. We went over one day, and the door was broken. The lock was there. So that ended in our private kind of club. But anyway, it was adventure and it was fun. I kind of see these things. The other thing was that, so I graduated in 53, so I started 49 in high school. And this fellow Jerry, was always ready for some adventure. And so one day, one of the teams in school had won a championship, and as a result, the principal decided to close the school for the day. It's a holiday, everybody had a holiday. So it was early in the morning. The school was located downtown. So Jerry said to me, he said, "Lou, we got the day, why don't we hitchhike to New York?" And I said, "Well, yeah, that sounds pretty exciting. We'll do that." And so Route 40 ran right by our school. So we just kind of walked over to Route 40 and stuck our thumbs out, and we started getting rides. And the New Jersey Turnpike had just opened, and had only been open a few years. And so we were on the Jersey Turnpike. We got a ride. This guy was going to New York. I said, "That's really great." So I looked at my watch, and it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I said, "Jerry, I don't think we ought to go." I said, "It's obviously we can make it New York, but I don't think we ought to go there. I think we better start heading home." So we asked the gentleman to pull over the side of the road because we needed to go back. So he did. He left us off, and we walked across the side of the road, stuck our thumb up, and a police car came by. He said, "You can't hitchhike on the Jersey Turnpike." I said, "Oh, okay." So we made our way off of the turnpike, found some road, and somehow or other, we made our way into Philadelphia, to the bus station. And it was about 8 o'clock at night. So I said, "Well, I better call home." So I called home, and I said, "Mom, I'm in Philadelphia. We were held this little trip, but we're in a bus station, and we have enough money to get a fare home." And so Jerry said, "I'm not calling home." He said, "You call home and ask your mother to call my mother," which he did. So we got home about 2 o'clock in the morning at the bus station, and we looked at our resources. We just had enough money for one bus fare. And so Jerry lived further away. I said, "Okay, Jerry, you take the bus fare and I'll walk home." So, it was about 4 or 5 miles. So I walked home, got home. And the next day we went to school and told about our great adventure. So we had, that was kind of illustrative of some of the adventures I had in high school.
Who was your first girlfriend?
Oh my God.
You must remember her.
I remember my first date, and I remember her name was Claire Ruppel, I think. I guess I was a freshman in high school, and there was a dance at Eastern High School. It was a girls' high school, and my good buddy Frank and I decided that we would go to it, and so I worked up enough nerve to ask Claire to go for me to this dance. It was terrible. I couldn't dance. It was the beginning. It was a very disastrous beginning of my dating career. But I pursued, and of course, then being in the dramatic club and meeting all these young ladies and the parties and stuff like that. So I don't remember who my first particular girlfriend was. I dated a lot of different girls over the years.
Were you a good student?
I was average, I would say. I wasn't.
Did you have particular topics that you enjoyed more than others to study?
Kind of social stuff, history, those kind of things. My math was not one of my strong suits, or I was able to get through it, but I wasn't one of my strong suits. More along public affairs, history, those kind of things. I mean, that's the kind of reading I do now. I do a lot of that kind of reading sort of things.
But then take me through, you graduate,
Yeah.
then what happens?
Well, I went to college, went to a local college here, Loyola College here in town. And
Why?
A couple of the kids that I hung around with in the neighborhood and so forth, we were going to college, you know. I went through elementary school 1 through 8 was a Catholic school, and I guess there was probably about 25 or 30 kids in the class, and I think only 3 of us went on to college. No, actually, only about maybe 5 of the kids went to private high school. Most of them went to public high school. A young kid whose name was Lou Bandell, we both shared their name. And then Frank lived, you know, we all lived within a block of each other. We all went to a school called Calvert Hall. And I guess I went because my brother went there and my friends were going there. That's why I went. And went to Loyola because it was here in town. It was a day school you go to. It was relatively inexpensive. You could go there. And I had no particular ambition that I wanted to be a lawyer or a doctor. Just thought, this is what you did. You went to college and you got a job and you met somebody and you got married and had a family. It was kind of basically American middle class kind of thing.
Do you remember what your Eagle Scout project was?
We didn't have any particular project back in those days. This scout group that I was with was kind of independent, kind of a group. I had mentioned earlier about the gentleman named Howard, who lived across the street, was older than me, and about the neighborhood and so forth. So I guess when I was 12, he was like 15 or 16, so he was like a big guy. And he was quite an interesting individual, and so we kind of followed our own path as a Boy Scout group. We went to summer camp. We did all kinds of things that the officials of camp didn't particularly appreciate, but we did it anyway. It was fun, doing all kind of crazy stuff. So I don't think back in those days you had to have a project to get it. You had to just get merit badges and that kind of thing. It was we were in college, and this fellow Jerry I mentioned before, and Frank, I'm not sure who came up with the idea, but we decided that we were going to go up to Harper's Ferry, where the Potomac and the Potomac and the Shenandoah rivers meet, and they flow down to Washington. So we decided that we would drive up there, and we would build a log raft, and we'd float down to Washington. So, actually, I don't remember whose car it was. Anyway, we drove up, and we knew we were going to be away, so we found where we get near the river, but we knew that you probably shouldn't do this, so we had to get kind of an isolated spot to do this. So we drove up, and we kind of drove the car into the woods. And we thought, well, we don't want anybody to steal the car. So somebody said, well, if you take the distributor off, you couldn't start the car. So we took the distributor off. I mean, none of us had any idea about mechanics or anything. I don't know where we got this crazy idea. So we hiked on down to the river, and we kind of set up the camp. And we started looking for logs to make this raft. So we'd find some logs, and we'd cut a couple down, and we drug them over to the water's edge. And we lashed the logs together. So we had, I guess about 6 foot across logs, and I kind of stuff. And it turns out we got the only way you keep the thing afloat was you had to spread all over like this in order so it wouldn't sink. It wouldn't kind of stuff. So we knew that this was really a stupid idea. And of course we gave it up, and I don't think we got the thing more than 10 foot down the stream. Well, this is really a stupid idea. And we just unlashed the logs and let them float down on their own. So that was kind of a strange thing I did as a young teenage kid driving up.
So you're in college.
Yeah, I was in college then, actually, yeah.
And what are you studying?
English. I remember, so the first English class I had, I didn't do very well in it. I think I got a D or something. I thought, I probably need help in this area, so I decided to take English as a major. So that's what I did. Which is kind of a strange way to just pick up major, I guess. But anyway, that's what I did.
So take me through the college years. You're not living on campus, you're commuting.
Yeah, no, I'm still living at home. Yeah, still living at home and commuting daily.
And how did the college years go?
They were fun. They were great, we did all kinds of strange things, like the crazy raft trip sort of thing. Went to all the dances, the parties, stuff like that kind of thing. Joined the choral group. Friend of mine, Frank, who had a really good voice and was pretty good, he talked me into joining the choral group. And that was fun, so that was enjoyable. Once again, you got a chance to visit all the girls' colleges around, so that was kind of fun. I had, in the summertime, I would get jobs in the summertime. The the tuition back then was $500 a semester. And so you could get a job in the summertime and make enough money for at least one semester. And so I worked at Bethlehem Steel, I worked in the shipyards, did those kinds of things, sort of.
Hard work.
Yeah, oh yeah, it was. It encouraged me to I remember working in the shipyards. One of my first jobs, it was called Maryland Dry Dock. And one of my first jobs, I was like a helper, machinist helper or something. And the guy gave me this big Stilton wrench, and he said, "Go up there and to the smokestack and take that whistle or some kind of thing up on the smokestack." So I climbed up there with this great thing, and I looked around and I thought, I'm going to really pay attention to the studies from now on, kind of thing. So I worked there I got half the summer, and the way it worked was in the mornings, you'd all gather in the mornings, and the boss would come out, and he would assign you to a ship that came in for repairs. This shipyard just did repairs. It didn't build ships. It repaired ships. And we all stand out there waiting for our assignments. And so if not enough ships came up, you didn't get a job. It kind of reminded me of, remember?
On the waterfront.
Yeah, it reminded me, it was sort of like that. So after a while, and so you could read you could look in the paper and you could find out which ships were coming into port and where they were going to go to either Bethlehem Steel or they were going to go to the Maryland Dry Dock. So you could get some idea of what the business is going to be like. So if you're always a little anxious about whether you get a job. So about halfway through the summer, I got a call from Bethlehem Steel, said they had an opening at Bethlehem Steel. So I said, okay, great. So we went to Bethlehem Steel, and they paid like $70 a week. This was like really a lot of money back in those days. So I worked at what was called a 42-inch coal strip mill, and and this was the heyday of Bethlehem Steel. They had like 30,000 people work down there, and when you approached the factory to go in, they had a big sign up that you had to pass under, and the sign said how many days it's been since the last fatality. So that kind of helped to focus you for the day about what you want to do. So I worked there for the rest of the summer and was able to get enough money for my first semester of tuition. So that was my summers in college.
So when did you meet Pat?
I met Pat right after college. Right after I graduated college, I was in a program back in those days where if you could join the reserves, you could join the reserves for 6 months, and you only had to do, for 6 years, and you did 6 months active duty, and then 5.5 years in the reserves, so you didn't have to go in and do a whole 2-year drafting kind of thing. So right after college, I went in to do my 6 months duty, and got home. So I got home just around Christmas time. Came home, and Loyola had an employment office. I called them, and you could find out they had jobs available. So I called them, and they had this job at an insurance company called Fidelity and Deposit. They didn't sell life insurance. They did kind of business insurance for banks, contracts, and things of that sort. So, and they were located downtown. So I started working down there. After about a year, a friend of mine who I was in college with and in the Army with, he changing jobs. He wanted to change jobs and everything. And I said, and he knew where I worked. So I said, well, why don't you come down? I think they probably have openings. So he came down and he got a job at the F&D also. And he worked I worked in banking and he worked in contracts. And I was on the 3rd floor, and he was on the 7th floor. So after a while, he told me, he said, Dave, he said that there's this young English girl that came in the office. He says, you know, she's kind of nice English girl. And I had always been fascinated with England. I used to read a lot of English literature and things of that sort. So I was kind of intrigued. And so they had a cafeteria in the building, and you could go there for a coffee break. And so would go to the coffee break and kind of looking around for this English girl. And I saw her, I thought, you know, interesting. So the company would offer, say, would have like a Christmas party, and they would have things of that sort. So whenever I went to it, I'd always find Pat there and try to develop a conversation, that kind of thing.
Or were you smitten with her from the beginning, in a way?
I was totally intrigued. Back in those days, she had a pretty strong English accent. I found her very attractive anyway. And so we started dating.
I had a very dear friend. All my girlfriends when I came to America were all named Pat. So I have to be very careful, all these Pats. And I met them through working at F&D. And they, as I said, we would have to go back and file everything, which we spent a lot of doing. 17 and 18-year-old girls can talk about a lot of things when they're having to file. Anyway, his break was ending as our break was starting. And my girlfriend, Pat, thought he was the cat's meow. And I'm like, I gotta look at him again. So as we were walking in, she always pushed me in first. Is he there? Is he there? And I said, yeah, he's there. And then I'd walk over and go get coffee or tea, and she'd. So he came up to the office one day, and he saw his friend Bob, who was working in our office. And then he passed Bob, and he came up to Pat and I, and he said, would you two like to go out with a friend of mine? I don't know whether he told me where it was going, but I'm going to use this one because I think this is the first time he danced with me. And it was the beer garden where now it's the Symphony House in Baltimore City, but it used to be called Deutsches House. And it was a true beer, German beer, polka things and everything. And it was wonderful. It was fun. I didn't know which guy was, I didn't know who he wanted to be with, whether it was Pat or me. Anyway, he asked me to dance. And it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And Johnny Hopkins was the other guy, and I sat in the back seat with him. I didn't sit up front. I remember that. Anyway, I then had a party at my house where my parents lived. And I invited a whole lot of people. I had a great time. And he called me the next day, and he said, would you like to go on a date? And I said, well, now I know. And my mom had said to me, can I tell this? My mom, when I got back from the date, she says to me, did you have a great time? I said, yeah, I did. I said, I really like that guy. So she said, yeah, he's cute. I said, oh, you got the wrong guy, Mom.
I wanted to kind of impress her with my sophistication, I guess. I remember our first date was, I think it was a Sunday, and I said, I'm gonna take you out to dinner to this little restaurant in Emmitsburg, Maryland, which was about, I don't know, 30 or 40 miles out of town. A friend of mine had taken me to this place called the Green Parrot, I remember. So we drove up and we had dinner there, and then I said, I want to show you this little train station that's not far from here. It's really a cute train station. And I knew about it because when I was in the Boy Scouts, we had gone on a camping trip on the Appalachian Trail in the wintertime, and it snowed while we were there. We decided we better go home, and we hiked into this little town, Blue Ridge Summit, that had this train station. It's really a very neat, attractive train station, and we took the train back home. And I was always impressed with the train station. So I said, I'd like to take you over and show you this train station. So we went over and showed the train stations. And then we drove back to Baltimore, and I said, I want to take you down to the harbor. I want to show you something at the harbor. So we drove down to the harbor, and I showed her the
Domino sugar sign.
Domino sugar sign. You know about the Domino sugar sign?
I remember.
Very famous thing. So I showed her. And while we were sitting there looking at the Domino sugar sign, we had our first kiss. So that, it was really a nice day for me. I thought, I'd like to see this girl again. So that's when we started dating pretty seriously.
How long?
I kissed him and I put my tongue in his mouth. And he nearly flipped out. After twice of seeing him, when he was coming over and he got out the car, my stomach down here did a little flip. And I'm like, you really, really like this guy. And I said to myself, yes, I do. I knew. I've never felt myself being a giddy teenager. I could be silly and I could do dumb things, but I just never felt like the other kids. And American girls were, well, it was just, we were different. I started school when I was in first grade at 4, because that's what Europeans do. You're 4 to 16, because they believe you give a child as much as they can learn between birth and 7 or 8 years old. And after that, it's just icing on the cake. But you've brought everything in from the values of your mom and dad, your siblings, the whole 9 yards. So, yes, I knew right away. The only thing I had to correct him on was he said, oh, I love how English people speak. And I went, oh, really? You can't think of anything more original.
So we were dating for maybe 5-6 months. And so every week I know we get together and so forth. So one of our dates, and I was sort of the impression this was just another girl I was dating. And so one day, then Pat, she told me that she loved me. Well, nobody had ever said that to me before, so I was kind of shocked and kind of not ready to kind of accept this kind of a thing. But it was kind of really nice to have that kind of a response to myself. So obviously I continued to date her, and after not too long, next month, I said, I think I do too. I think we all should get married. So we got, I think it was 13 months since the time we met, the time we got married.
He has an incredible sensitivity. He's very wonderful. And I know you'll laugh when I say this. He had, and still does, have beautiful hands. And I felt like, if he's got pretty hands, he can touch my body.
And it was obviously the smartest thing I ever did, and a wonderful thing that Pat told me she loved me, and it's been kind of a wonderful love affair ever since. That's how we got started.
When we got married, he had a little money saved. I think it was about 10 or 12,000, which I thought was a lot. I'm making 2,000 a year. And so he wanted so desperately for us to just go to Europe again. I've just come from there in '57. He's 61, wants me to go back there. And I said, well, I'd really like to stay here and have children. Well, I don't think that had even crossed his mind at this point. So we stayed here because of the Army, because we were only married 3 months when he was called back. And then we'd gone away for a weekend to the beach before he left in October. And I got pregnant then. And one of the things that Lou can do, and has always been able to do when we're talking, he brings another whole perspective to how I see things. Lou won't argue. Never has. And tell me right away he would never argue. He'd walk away. Not meaning walk out the house, just leave the area. Because as he said, two people have to argue, and I've had enough of hearing it at my home. And my parents snipped at one another, but they never argued that one leaves the house or anything. So no, sometimes you just gotta say things. It's pissing you off. I mean, we never had any knockout, drag-out fights. Oh yes, there was one on our house. We got back from a honeymoon, and you were doing something in this little apartment we had, and you were not being very nice. That didn't happen too many times, but you were in the bedroom, and you'd just come out of the shower, and I did that at you, and you lost your balance, splayed your naked body in front of me, and I was running down the hall.
You had a great time at Old Northwood.
Oh, yes.
Talk to me about your home there.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we moved there in 1968. We had 2 children, and we were expecting our 3rd children, so we needed a bigger place. And this neighborhood, we knew about this neighborhood. It wasn't too far from where we lived. We knew about this neighborhood, and we kind of liked it, so we went over and we started that we need to move and get a bigger place, and we found this particular house that we wanted, moved in, and I remember particularly my mother-in-law was a little anxious about if there was any. So our oldest son Chris was what, 7, 8 years old when we moved in?
Going up to being 6.
Yeah. I remember my mother-in-law was anxious whether we were going to have any children in the neighborhood for him to play with. Well, before the day was out, that wasn't a problem, because there were a lot of kids living in the neighborhood. There's the Lazzatis who lived down the street had 10 kids, and 4 across the street, and 3. It was just kids all over the place. So that started. And the neighborhood our house was built in 1934, so it was kind of an old neighborhood in a sense. And a lot of the families were kind of original families, and new people were just starting to move in. And so Pat got together with some of the other new people and decided that we should maybe have a little party or something, kind of a thing. They started called it the newcomers party for all the new people that came in. And that turned out to be quite a success. It went on for, they probably still do it. They probably still do it. So the neighborhood started to change. New families came in, more kids came in. It was an interesting population of people. We lived not too far from Hopkins Hospital and University, and often there would be doctors or young doctors and people like that would move into the neighborhood. It was a great party neighborhood. I had mentioned earlier that because of my father's drinking, we never had friends over. So it was important for me that our house, the kids would bring our house over. And so the phone was always ringing. Kids were always over there. There was just tons and tons of kids in and out of the house, kind of a situation. And, parties, adult parties, kids parties. It was wonderful.
What's up with this Louseum? The home was often referred to as the Louseum. I've done my research.
Yeah, you certainly have. My God. Well, I did a lot of home repairs. So when we moved in, there was just an old basement, and so I made a basement clubhouse down there, sort of thing, and put a deck on and put another deck on, and we had a big garden, and every year I'd have a project in a garden. I would do something like that. Always had a project that was going on. Once again, this friend of mine, Frank, that I mentioned, he and I both started to get interested in that sort of thing. There was a man who lived across the street who was a PhD doctor, and he was into it. He had some pretty nice equipment, and he's kind of showed us some things to do. And I think, and then Frank and I found out that one of the schools was offering, in the summertime, were offering a woodworking class. So we went to that, and we kind of enjoyed it. So that's kind of how we got into it. And as I had said before, I was always a do-it-yourselfer kind of guy, and kind of enjoyed that, for not only because I didn't have enough money often to hire people to do it, but also it was a great deal of satisfaction when you were able to do it and you saw it, you kind of thing. So, after a while we'd buy another piece of equipment and kind of learn how to do it ourselves. So when I was working at this insurance company, it was the worst boring job in the world. Right over where my desk was, there was a clock, big clock on the wall. And so I said, don't look at the clock. Hold off as long as you can. And then I'd finally look up, and it'd be like 9:30. And it was that kind of a job. Thank God Pat was there, so I did. After a while, I did, it was nice fun to go to the coffee break kind of thing. So I thought, this is really bad. I said, look, this is before I'd formed a relationship, where I thought, well, I think what I'll do, I'll get a job teaching school. And that way I'll have the whole summer off and I can travel. So that was the plan. So I called up the Department of Education and I said, are you taking applications for teachers? She said, yeah. I said, well, have you graduated from college? I said, yes. She said, okay, we'll send you an application. I said, okay, great. So they send me an application, I fill it out, and I send it in, and I get a letter, and I have a job. Show up at this school to start your work. So this is how you were hired back in those days. I could have been a serial killer, a pedophile, whatever it is, but it was amazing. So I got this job at a brand new school called Patterson High School. And it was an interesting job. It was really great. I kind of enjoyed it. Had a number of incidences that I won't bore people with there. And then at that time, so then Pat and I started to date, that kind of thing. we were starting to date. And so by the time the school was over, my plans for traveling across the country on my own were gone. Never did get to do that, but it worked out, I think, better, kind of thing. So I thought, I sort of, it was kind of fun enjoyable working with the kids. I never had any problem with working with the kids. I was taught English was what I was teaching. But I said, I don't think I want to do this for the next 40 years. But I kind of enjoyed working with the kids. It was kind of nice. So I thought I'd kind of get into like a social work kind of a situation, sort of stuff. So I got a job working with big brothers. Yeah, so I finished school. I wasn't working, didn't have a job. We got married. I got married without a job. Pat was working as a file clerk. we had this little apartment, and it was October of 1961.
Yeah, he probably doesn't.
And Khrushchev decided to build the wall around the Berlin Wall, and John Kennedy was president. And he came on the air and gave this speech about the problems in Germany and everything, and that he was going to activate the reserves. I was still in the reserves. And Pat got all upset. I said, don't worry about it. I'm in a quartermaster quarter. Never call us. Nothing to worry about. Next Tuesday, I went to the meeting, and the captain says, get your affairs in order. So we activated our reserve unit, and we went down to Fort Lee. Nothing happened down there. We just kind of fooled around, didn't do much of anything. Occasionally there would be rumors about, we're going to be shipped over to France. We're going to be here. I thought, I've never been to France. That doesn't sound like a bad idea. Nothing ever happened. So...
well, they did something happen.
Oh, no. What? No. I had a child. That's what happened.
Oh, you didn't have a
Our
child.
first child was born while I was in the Army. Yeah, so I was down at Fort Lee. I got a call from Pat one day. She said, I'm having pains. I'm going to the hospital. We're going to have a baby. Oh, my God, you're going to have a baby. So you have to come home. So I went in, got a pass, got a Greyhound bus, came to town, got over to the hospital at 11 o'clock at night, and Chris was born at 11:30. Back in those days, fathers were nowhere near the situation. You couldn't be anywhere near it. And I went into the waiting room. There wasn't anybody there. It was 11:30 at night, and the ashtrays are all full of cigarette butts. That's how life was back in those days. And then so after a half hour, they came and said, your child was born, come in. And Pat was sharing her room with another woman. And we were in there talking, and the father of the woman in the other room came in, and he started to criticize his wife because his child wasn't the biggest baby born that day. It turns out ours was. Chris was over 9 pounds and everything. I remember that.
I do too.
And kind of clearly thought, I wonder if that marriage ever worked. I don't know.
Oh my God.
Anyway, so now I'm out of the Army, have a child, I have to find a job. So I got a job working as a probation officer at juvenile court in Annapolis. And that turned out to be a really interesting job. I was down there a couple of years, and then another possibility opened in Baltimore with the called Mental Health Association. Was like the Cancer Society, that kind of thing. So I started working with him. So my whole career was in a nonprofit area. I was with the Mental Health Association for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, and then I got an opportunity to work as the executive director of the Maryland chapter of the American Diabetes Association, and I finished up my career with them.
What is it with you and milk?
So, you know, we didn't have a lot of money. You had to kind of watch the budget kind of thing. So I had, you know, 2 young sons. They drink a lot of milk. Sure. And
Oh, he got 4.
yeah, well, you know what I'm talking about. So I discovered. I said, well, so I could get powdered milk, so I could make a gallon of powdered milk, and it's really there. But I would make it half and half.
We did that.
That was half and half. I never endeared myself to my boys because of that. That's for sure. I'm surprised Chris didn't mention that. Yeah, every summer we would take a camping vacations, you know. So the very first was that trip to California in the Beetle. We went to Canada a couple times, all the way up to Gaspé Peninsula. We went all the way to
Florida.
All the way to Florida,
Twice.
Key West, Florida. So I bought this trailer, and so you couldn't like park it on the street where we lived, and so I had to put it in the garage. Well, the problem was it wouldn't fit. It was like a foot too high, and so I had to break up the floor in order to get it in there. So I had to break up all the floor and redo the floor, and that way we fit the trailer into the thing. So it worked out great.
What kind of a dad do you think you were?
Oh, perfect, wonderful dad.
Easy.
Easy dad. No, I was the easy dad. I was a dad. No, Pat was the basic disciplinarian, and she did most of that with that look on her face. The kids knew a certain look. So I was pretty easy with the kids. Yeah, I guess because I knew Pat would make sure they wouldn't get too far along.
Do you feel like they knew you loved them?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, we always felt loved. Yeah. I'll give you an example. So when he turned 16, he said, "You know, when I get my license." I said, "Okay." I said, "But you know, you got to earn it. You just can't expect to get it. You got to make your grades. Got to get up. You expect you to." I had some kind of requirements for him to get it, so he didn't bother about getting it. Well, he didn't need a license because everybody had a car. He didn't, you know, he always had a ride. Our house was like where everybody met. And so when he turned 19, I said, "You will get your license."
We were going away.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were going to Europe.
So that's the kind of, you know, he had a raft of friends. He had a very friendly kind of a guy. Chris had no ego, right? I mean, he had no ego kind of thing, and he didn't need one. He was fortunate, good-looking kid. He always had plenty of girls, or you know, that sort of stuff, chasing him around and that kind of thing. And when his grades weren't as good as we think they should have been in high school, I probably should say Pat would talk to him and say, "If you don't get your grades up, you're going to go to this other school." Didn't have a good reputation. So, you know, he'd get his grades up and that sort of stuff. So he wasn't particularly academically inclined, just enough to get through. But great party guy. Yeah.
You did lose sleep over him for many years, didn't you?
Oh yes. Yeah, sure did. Yeah, because I guess he wouldn't. He didn't want to accept the responsibility of a husband, a fatherhood, that kind of thing.
Nope.
Yeah.
But you forgive him now for being that guy for several years.
Oh, yes.
Oh yes. I always loved him 100%. I never, we were anxious about, his carousing around sort of self, not taking life, but he always worked. I was always impressed with that. He always had a job. He always, took care of himself that way financially. He never came to us and say, hey, can you, I need some money or whatever it is. He always was responsible for taking care of himself. He had a number of young ladies that he had relationships with that we thought might develop something, but wasn't able to. He was never able to, say, take the responsibility of being a husband and that kind of thing. And as the years progressed, we were always anxious, I think it's fair to say, what was going to happen to him as he got older and being on his own, that kind of stuff. That's why we were so incredibly happy when he was sitting in that chair and told us that he and Hilary were getting married. It was, one of the happiest days of our life, that we knew he wasn't going to be...
the date up, in fact.
Yeah, that he wasn't going to be on his own. There was someone that was going to be with him and help him through the rest of his life.
And then Jonathan was a different kind of a cat.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Without comparing them, and
Yeah.
yet comparing them, you loved your children equally, but
Oh, yeah.
Jonathan was different.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Well, he was as social as Chris was. He always had a girlfriend. I mean, that stuff. They always partied and that kind of stuff. But he had more ambitions in terms of working and getting a career started, that sort of thing. Yeah, definitely.
And you like the man that he's become.
Oh yes, no, I couldn't be happier with my children, how they turned out. I couldn't be more proud of them.
But what were other things about Jonathan that you remember? Him being a young man.
It was
And I need to hear from
the
you.
dressing and the
Oh yeah. He was always a bit of a peacock, so to speak. He always wanted to make sure he looked good, had the right clothes, whatever was going on. At one point we had some kind of exercise apparatus in the basement, I remember. And he would go there and he would work on that thing. He wanted to build his body up, that kind of stuff. Yeah, he was a bit of a trip. Yeah, that was kind of stuff.
And then you get a daughter. What was that like?
Oh my God, that was wonderful. Of course, I got her on my birthday. I mean, how better can you be? I mean, she was, it was just amazing. She was so different than the boy, obviously, so different from the boys, kind of thing. And even when she was born with this massive black hair. But the other two boys were as bald as I am now. And she came out with this great, and then her eyes were all squinched up. It looked like a little Eskimo or something like that. But then, as she got older, and she always was, I called it, do you remember the character in Pogo called Grundoon? Do you remember the cartoon Grundoon, Pogo? It was very famous, at least here on the East Coast anyway. And there was a little character in there called Grundoon. And Grundoon would have the little balloon, and it just had letters. So it wasn't speaking, it was just like making noises. And Liz was that way. She'd be in her little crib or whatever it was called, and she'd always be making these funny nails, these sounds and everything. So I used to call her Grundoon, that kind of thing. And so, it was wonderful because she was so different than the boys and added a whole different dimension to the family dynamics and that kind of stuff. Yeah, it was just amazing. I feel, I think I'm happy and satisfied with my life. I've been the most, fortunate of people, of men. I've never had any physical difficulties in my life. Life has been so interesting with Pat, all these 63 years. At her 80th birthday, which we celebrated here at Oakcrest, I told everybody that I was a very fortunate man because I've actually had 2 wives. I had one before she went to school, and I had one after she went to school. And both of those wives have been very interesting and wonderful people to live your life with. It's really great. So how much fortunate can somebody be but to have that kind of experience? And my children have been wonderful. Never had any serious problems with them. Anxieties, of course, from time to time, how things would turn out. But they're all happily married with wonderful spouses. And I think one of the things at this party they just gave me made me really, really proud of my kids, that they were willing to and interested to and able to pull off that incredible party they gave for me. It was just really wonderful. So I couldn't have asked for a better life. It's been remarkable.
But surely, any major regrets, forks in the road that you took, that if you had it to do all over again, maybe you'd have gone down a different road?
No, not in any serious way. No. Mm-mm. My working career has been not, I never made tons and tons of money, but I felt comfortable, and I think that my family felt reasonably comfortable that we had a pretty good life that way. And the kind of work I did was very rewarding and fulfilling, the kind of things I did that way. So I don't really have any regrets for that. I don't think I would have changed anything.
How do you want to be remembered?
Just as a good person that had friends and were able to help people, and someone interested in the world, that the country that continues to be a good place to live, that kind of thing. I never really gave it that much deep thought. Kind of accepted the way things have been in my life, kind of thing.
Where have you evolved at 90 in terms of believing that something happens when you die?
Well, the basic Christian idea about what happens after death is a wonderful, wonderful thing to contemplate. And I'm just not 100% sure it's going to work out that way. I would dearly love it to work out that way. But I don't see too much evidence of it having worked out that way. I don't know, I've gotten dismissive of religion. I see religion has people use religion to gain power, and so I've been kind of turned off that whole idea. Look at the world, and it's just a remarkable thing. The more we learn about the universe, you wonder how that could all happen. There probably is a higher power, but it's not evident. Sort of to me, it's not evident to me. But there are things that happen in the world that there aren't any scientific explanations of. There's probably, I don't know. I would love to believe the basic Christian idea about what happens to you, but I'm not 100% sure. So I'm not disparaging people of it, putting it down. If it comes along, I'm going to be really happy about that. That's sort of my overall concept about religion and spirituality and that kind of thing. I guess my spirituality is really how I treat my fellow person. I'm tolerant of other people. Sometimes it's difficult to be tolerant of some way people live, but try to give everybody, try to treat everybody as equal, not try to be judgmental about everybody. It gets sometimes difficult to do, but basically that's kind of my approach to living.
I just, as you know, we were born on the same day, and for the longest time, like when I was little, I thought that I didn't believe it. I thought that they just made it up. That why? How can I possibly be born on my dad's birthday? Like, I'm supposed to have my own day, and he's supposed to have his own day. But now, I mean, obviously, as I got older, and I've realized, and that's even more special to share that, and the fact that, I'm the only girl, so. But yeah, no, it was just we've had a great relationship. We've always have. He was lots of good fun memories. He was a goof. We made fun of him, but in a loving, good way. Family was really important to him. So we always we had dinners together every night. It was important that we were all together. And we did, every year we did a long vacation, like 3-week vacation. And so family, that was just really important. He valued that, and he's just a all-around good man. People like him. He's kind to people. He's easy to talk to. Sometimes you can't shut him up. Yeah, I wouldn't ask for another father. I lucked out. That I'm just so fortunate to have you for all these years. That you're 90 years old and you are just an amazing man, and I love you and wish you many more years to come, and happy birthday.
So here are the things about Lou. So Lou Bandell, great dad. A guy you could always count on, would always be there in your corner, but he was just like a typical dad. So he was not really ever, there was always some things that you could pull over his eyes and he really didn't know what's going on, which was pretty funny. So my older brother and I, we were always kind of getting into trouble once we became teenagers. My little sister, not so much. And my father would always be like, all right, boys, on a Saturday, I got a lot of projects. He was a big DIY guy. Never wanted to spend any kind of money on any type of project. Always thought he could handle it, to my mother's chagrin. And so I was on the second floor. We lived in this little end townhouse, and my brother, 4 years older, was up on the third floor, the attic. So he was kind of away from everything. And during high school, he's 4 years older, so he didn't think I was that cool being that much younger than him. And he'd be up there and he would just sleep all day. And my dad would just be like, just get Jonathan up. He'll come out and he'll help me out and whatever. I was like, and I would just constantly like, Dad, you got to get Chris up. You know, I'm sick of this. I'm doing all the damn work, always. And he's like, nah, yeah, whatever. So he's taught me just how to like take every day, day by day. He's introduced me to the natural world, which has just been a complete wonder. He took us on many vacations during the 70s. Little tiny camper. We'd head out for 3 weeks. He'd be pulling his little Toyota, and we'd hit all these national parks. And it was just phenomenal. And he turned me into a birder, a nerdy birder. Bought my first bird field guide in Mesa Verde, Colorado in 1977 and inscribed it. And so it kind of taught me like the natural world and seeing all those things was just fabulous in the 70s. And when I think about the experiences that he took us on, and my mom being from England, she hated the whole camping aspect. And so, but she had to just go along with it. So, but it was many fun times. Dad, Lou Bandell, 90 years is remarkable, and I knew that you would always do it. You are a young man, always have been, and biked, hiked. You did everything. You're a very active guy, and love you so much. You've taught me a lot, and I can't believe you're still with us. And you're a great dude. Funny. You love your kids. You love us. You love your grandchildren, and you're just fun to be with. Happy birthday, old man.
He held a pretty tight ship when we were younger. Of course, I was the oldest, so I kind of like broke him a little bit. But it was nice because our house was always open to the neighborhood, and we had very strong connections with all the families that lived there. It was like a nice, it was like an open door policy. I drove him crazy, but one thing I love about my father is he never gave up, and he hung in there, and I hung in there with him, and we eventually became really tight, and even as adult men really bonded together big time. I mean, he always says I was a late bloomer, and that's for sure. But I think he hung in there as a dad, and he's reaped the benefits of finally seeing, me going in some great directions. I love my dad because of the quirky little things that he has always been into. He was just a little different than, or maybe he wasn't, but to me he was different growing up because, like I said, he wasn't into sports that much. He liked to hike. He liked to, nature, but he also liked museums. He liked classical music. He was into a different, path. But as I've gotten older, there's a lot of people that are on that path. But to me, I think going to St. Matthew's, most fathers were like, fit a certain standard, and I thought my dad was totally different. So that's really a big reason why I respect him so much. It's always with when we were on our one-on-one camping trips, and I remember in particular we took a bike trip down to the Outer Banks, and we camped in Salvo, which is really south, and we set up our tent and got a little bite to eat. And I just remember going out on the beach with my dad underneath these incredible stars, and just had this talk about like this philosophical talk, about just the universe and about life, and just it was a very memorable evening. It had all the perfect points. Yes, no doubt. I hope he remembers that, because I sure do. Dad, I want you to know that you have definitely been influential in so many ways to me, because you've given me the opportunity to see life in so many different facets, and you're non-judgmental. You have let me figure out things for myself, and all the advice and the help you've given me, it was never over the top. And just to say, Dad, you just taught me a lot of life lessons. Even you still have life lessons for me to this day. And I love you for it, and I'm a better son for it.
Well, Chris, Jonathan, and Liz, my greatest hope is that you have wonderful lives, that you are able to experience the wonderful lives that I have had, how you have been great contributors to making that such a wonderful and happy life. I hope that you, like I just said about treating other people, I hope you also are able to treat all those people in your life the same way. Reach out to them to be understanding and helpful whenever you can, because in the long run, that's going to make you happier people if you can reach out and help other people. That cliche about it's better to give than to receive really is quite true. Perhaps as you get older, that'll be even more understandable to you. So I hope it's continues to be a wonderful life that you're going to have.
I have no idea what year this will be. It will be a year that I won't see you anymore. But I think you know, but I can never say it enough how much I love you. And how you've made my life, your dad. I've thanked him so many times for we having 3 gorgeous children. And you were the greatest joys in my life, absolutely. And one of the other great things, you've always been good to one another. You always, I know that Liz will continue to gather you together when things have to be done.